Hey, good to see you. Uh, our Gompa Ropsel class a little bit smaller today. I hope a couple more people will show up. We're going to begin with some prayers. You know them, but Louise is going to put them up anyway. Sangye chodang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Drola Penshir. Drola means two migrators or four migrators. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupasho. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. Then you have to move it up a little bit, Louise. There you go. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay. And as always, we're going to begin with a little physical meditation. Good to see Suvansh has joined us. Um, so sit comfortably. Relax your body. Let go of that tension. Relax your mind. No need to think about anything else. Place your mindfulness on the breathing in front. Hopefully you've been a little successful in calming the mind from the discursive thoughts, bringing your attention away from them. Now bring your attention to the more subtle object of the mental consciousness itself. First of all, just the consciousness, the conventional consciousness that is clear and knowing. Much more subtle and elusive object to observe. We know it first through its content. Thoughts, images, interconversations with their sound generalities, thoughts of the past, memories, plans, thoughts of the future, future-oriented conceptions, thoughts of the present, observations, the presence or lack of afflictions, delusions, the presence of virtuous states of mind, hopefully. All of these events are transitory. They come and go according to how much attention we pay to them, also due to our karma, sometimes almost without wanting to. We get angry or we're depressed, some kind of depression due to karma. But the underlying conventional nature of our mind, not the mind itself, but its nature, is clear light. Its function is to know. It is clear and knowing. Like fire is that which is hot and burning. Consciousness is that which is clear and knowing. Its clarity is its fundamental nature. Its function is to know. Its action. That clear light nature of the mind is also known as the developmental Buddha nature. Even hearing that can bring joy to the mind, that we ourselves can change. We can get rid of all of the bad coding, so to speak. In an idealized Elon Musk, eliminating everything down to the bone and reformatting our hard drive, so to speak, our solid state drive. The fact that this is possible is due to this clear light nature that does not impede the entry into the mental consciousness, thoughts, and emotions. It doesn't impede their reabsorption back into the mind. The fact that we can observe this now in real time, developing some certainty about it and feeling joy about it, is the fact that we can do that is due to this auspicious moment that we have as a human being born at the time when the Buddha has dispensed the teachings, turned the wheel of Dharma, that the teachings still exist, There are followers and benefactors. We are not impeded by unfree states of the hell realms or preta realm or animal realm or long life gods, or being born as a human without full senses, being mute or blind, not being born in a country where we cannot practice the Dharma. We're free of all of these unfree states. We have all of the richnesses that were impelled on this rebirth by our own karma, our own practice in the past, to have a human life like this, to be able to benefit ourselves and sentient beings. We can use this opportunity to go beyond the present preoccupations with our health or our economy or politics or our power, our popularity, whether we're loved or not, our possessions. We can go beyond all of those eight worldly dharmas and others that are concerned only with the appearances of this life right now, and thinking of a much larger picture beyond just the happiness of this life, being willing to put up with suffering and frustration in order to achieve liberation from cyclic existence by following the three higher trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom. But beyond that, the Buddha said, those who are of the best caliber of sharp faculties, especially the faculty of wisdom, should consider his Mahayana, greater vehicle, as their choice of pursuit, object of pursuit, not for their self alone, not to achieve liberation for themselves alone, but to achieve a state of bodhi, all-knowing, omniscience, that knows reality as it actually is totally peaceful and experiencing every instant in great bliss, knowing the minds of sentient beings, and works constantly to liberate them from cyclic existence and set them in that, eventually in that very same state of omniscience. To do that, we need to have the accumulation of the two collections of merit and wisdom, merit being virtuous karma, essentially, achieved through actions of body, speech, and mind on the relative plane, the conventional level, and the collection of wisdom, the development of insight into emptiness, that collection of wisdom being the cooperative cause to achieve the wisdom dharmakaya, and the collection of merit, the cooperative cause to achieve the form bodies, the rupakayas, the two form bodies, the nirmanakaya and the sambhogakaya of the Buddha, for the benefit of sentient beings. In order to understand those collections, how to achieve them for the benefit of sentient beings, we need to rely on the Buddha's teachings, which were sometimes obscure even at the time that he taught it, unless one had the prior familiarization. So Nagarjuna wrote commentaries, which were elucidated by Chandrakirti in his Madhyamakavatara, Lama Khapa, even commenting and summarizing and explaining that in more detail in his illumination of the thought. I think I'm going to participate in the class today, studying that text for that ultimate purpose, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. That terminology coming from the method to develop bodhicitta, stemming through Maitreya and so forth. The 7 methods of cause and effect, but also the methods to develop bodhicitta stemming from Manjushri, equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. We can still call them mother sentient beings, but seeing even when they haven't been mother, when they have been strangers, even when they've been enemies, they've benefited us. I think I'm going to participate in the class in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. All mother sentient beings. And then bring your attention back, present. To see you. Hi, Rachel has arrived also. So how are we doing? How was your meditation? Okay. Mikhail, I noticed you were kind of staring out into space. Are you okay? Were you meditating or?
Yeah. I was following us.
Okay.
I have a question about general question about calm abiding. So, although it is not one of the objects explained in Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, what about obtaining calm abiding with a meditation like Tonglen? Would it be possible?
Yeah, so I'm not sure why you say it's not explained in Lama Tsongkhapa's Gopa Rapsal, the text that we're studying.
Yeah, he's talking about breathing but not specifically about Tonglen, bringing suffering and
Right. I thought you said that calm abiding was not explained in Gopa.
no.
Okay.
No,
So
just the object Tonglen, specific object.
okay, Tonglen. So yeah, Tonglen is a practice that was particularly popularized in Tibet, and it did have its antecedents in uh, Indian Buddhism, certainly at Nalanda and so forth, but it finds incredible prevalence there. So when you're doing Tonglen, and you all know what Tonglen is, right? Is there anyone who doesn't know what Tonglen means? Richard, do you know what Tonglen means? Tonglen.
Uncle George, you froze.
Thought transformation.
Come again?
Thought transformation.
So no, Tong literally means giving and taking. Tongwa is
I'm
one.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Of course.
one of the verbs that means, to send out. So we say giving, and lemba means to take, like, with your hand, taking. So it's a particular kind of practice that is meant to enhance the understanding the defects of having understood the defects of self-cherishing thought, and the benefits of and overturning that frame of mind and developing the mind that cherishes others, having already developed that understanding, then going on to try to actively denigrate your self-cherishing by imagine taking on the suffering of others yourself, in imagination and when possible, in actual practice. For instance, when others are, burdened with some kind of suffering, uh, whether it be financial or physical, like the hell being that was the Bodhisattva Shakyamuni, eventually became Shakyamuni, when in the hell realm, when he envisioned other beings having to pull these carts of stones that were being whipped by the hell beings, and he in his own mind volunteered to take on their suffering. That itself is kind of taking on that suffering, that mind that tries to degenerate the self-cherishing thought, and also enhancing the mind of giving. So that sometimes can even be, in certain circumstances, once you become familiar with that, even coupled with your breathing. Imagine as you breathe in, taking on the suffering of sentient beings, and breathing out all of your body, your virtues, and so forth, your possessions to other beings, enhancing their happiness. So that process itself culminates with the what's called the exceptional thought, laksam. When you think, well, I've done this for a long time, but it hasn't changed anything. That people are still suffering and so forth. So therefore, I must become a Buddha to actually bring this about. So it's at that thought, it's at that point that the calm abiding would take place. When you're breathing, or when you're imagining taking on the suffering of sentient beings and giving your body and virtues and so forth, it's not so much an object of concentration, right, Mikhail? It would seem like that the point of the actual development of calm abiding, or utilizing calm abiding in that process, would be when you're developing the thought of bodhicitta itself, the laksam, and trying to hold that single pointedly. It's said in the some of the monasteries, the Gelugpa monasteries, that in order to develop bodhicitta, you need to have calm abiding. So there is some relationship there, but it's not so associated with Tonglen. Usually Tonglen is an alternative to the four close placements of mindfulness. Well, it could be integrated. It could be considered to be one of the four close placements of mindfulness, right? What do you know what the four close placements of mindfulness are, Mikhail?
Attention to the body, to the feelings, to the other ones.
Right? What is that? Mind and phenomena, something like that. So, sometimes people say, why don't the Mahayanists, who are supposed to be strictly following the Buddhist teachings, why don't they do the practice so much the breathing meditation? That's the fundamental. That falls within which of those four close placements, Mikhail?
Body.
Body, right? Close placement, mindfulness on the body also includes walking meditation, close placement of mindfulness on the body, eating meditation, and so forth. And so the great lamas say that the reason is that in the Mahayana, the most important object of mindfulness is, the mindfulness of the defects of self-cherishing thought, and the mindfulness on the benefits of cherishing others. That's where the mindfulness is put. So mindfulness itself is an auxiliary to developing calm abiding, but it is not calm abiding itself, right? Calm abiding has an object of observation that's not moving, like the conceptual thought. You're holding something that is not you're not imagining it's changing. Whereas in taking on the suffering of sentient beings and sending out your own virtues, there's something that's kind of moving. Okay. Actually, Suvanshat had his iconic hand up there first. So Suvash, you patiently waited.
Oh, no, thank you, Venerable George. That was good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, good.
The meditation this morning brought up a question, a lingering question that I've had and not had a chance to ask you. But it's a matter of just clarifying definitions and the pervasion or the scope of the definition. So there are 5 aggregates on which the person is imputed. The 5th one is the aggregate of consciousness.
Right.
And my question is, does the aggregate of consciousness pervade or include the clear light nature of the mind?
Okay.
And the reason why I ask you the question is just because from one perspective is that the 5 aggregates do not continue after death, and therefore, but the clear light nature definitely goes forward. Therefore, my answer to that question would be no, it is not subsumed within the 5th aggregate.
Okay, so several points there need to clarify. So when you say the consciousness aggregate, does that include the mental factors?
The consciousness aggregate does not include the mental factors, because those are included, I think, in the 4th. Is that not? It's included in.
Well, feelings are included in the feeling aggregate. Discriminations are included in the discrimination aggregate. All the rest of the mental factors are included in the 4th aggregate, the compositional factors aggregate.
Right.
So what is meant by the consciousness aggregate?
Therefore, I would assume it's main mind.
Right. It's primary consciousness. All the primary consciousness, whether it be of the 5 sense consciousnesses or of the mental consciousness. And so those are all aggregates themselves are permanent or impermanent or can be either.
Aggregates themselves are all impermanent.
They're all impermanent. So the clear light nature of the mind, it depends on which aspect of the clear light nature of the mind that you're talking about. Here in our morning meditation, we're centering on the aspect of the clear light nature of the mind, which is its lack of obstruction to the entry of and reabsorption of material back into the consciousness, right? That's called the developmental Buddha nature. So is that permanent or impermanent?
That is permanent.
So that's not included in the.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, good question. Anyone else have a question about our continuing meditation?
I have something.
Okay.
When you're meditating on emptiness and you're getting to this space of this clarity and knowing, I find myself.
Wait. When you're meditating on emptiness and you're getting on to this clarity and knowing,
Well,
those are 2 different things. You're not here. We're not, when we're meditating on the clarity and knowing, we're not meditating on emptiness. We're meditating in the conventional realm, right? The conventional clear light nature of the mind, this clarity, you can also ascribe the name clarity to the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, which is its emptiness. Here we're talking about the conventional clear light nature of the mind, right? Sean?
Well, can I just try to ask my question and see if you can
I'm
correct
sorry to interrupt you. Okay, you go on. Yeah, go on.
So I find myself getting into this space of like just vast openness and trying to like identify with that openness. But then in doing that, I'm recognizing, well, there's still this concept of spaciousness, so that's not emptiness. Is there a way to keep my mind from breaking that non-conceptuality?
So it sounds like you're not meditating on either emptiness or the clear light nature, the conventional clear light nature of the mind. It sounds like you're meditating on one of the factors that brings about the all is empty, one of the four formless absorptions. It's sort of like a prerequisite to that is what you're doing. What you're meditating on here is, first of all, trying to recognize that the mental consciousness has a conventional nature that does not obstruct the movement of material within it, that it is free of being stained by those conceptual thoughts that do arise within it, occasionally, that they are not part and parcel of its conventional nature. That's what you're trying to concentrate on. So it's not meditating on just all-encompassing spaciousness. That's one of the four formless absorptions, right? What are the four formless absorptions? Do you know? Stephen knows, I think.
Oh, I'm just remembering the peak of cyclic existence, which is the top one.
Yeah.
And the others I'm forgetting, Venerable George.
There's one that's nothing at all, right?
Yeah. So Nadine, what are the four formless absorptions?
I don't, yes, peak of cyclic existence, nothing at all. And one was space, only space. Maybe together we get them all.
Paul, have you come up? Do you know, Paul?
Right. So it's
Suvansh is looking in a book, so he'll
right. So it's what is it? Consciousness only, space only, peak of existence and beyond neither, something like that, I think.
What is it, Suvash? You find yet? Not yet. Okay. Don, do you know?
No, I don't remember them either, Joyce.
Richard? No one? Rachel?
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
I think it's infinite space, infinite consciousness, the state of nothing at all, and then the peak of cyclic existence. Did I get that?
Yeah, well, so the peak of cyclic existence, or cyclic existence, however you like to pronounce it, that's still something, right? That doesn't identify so much what the state of consciousness is at that point. It's neither discrimination or non-discrimination, something like that, right? So one meditates in various ways that everything is consciousness. Is that not the first one? Then beyond that, it's not conscious. There's nothing. It's just space. And then nothing at all, and neither discrimination or non-discrimination, something like that. It's worth going back and checking that Stephen and Nadine, who usually have these encyclopedic facts at their fingertips, should check. So what you're saying, Sean, is that you're kind of meditating on what? Not consciousness.
Well, because I'm recognizing that there's still the knowing there, regardless of how little else there is. So, but I feel like I'm
Okay, so
off the mark just slightly.
yeah, so what is consciousness? Consciousness is which is clear and knowing. As I've mentioned several times, like the definitions of the four elements, each of them have a nature and a function. Like fire is that which is hot and burning. The wind element is that which is light and moving. The earth element is that which is hard and supporting, and so forth and so on. So in analogy to that, consciousness has these two factors, that which is clear and knowing. Its clarity here means its conventional clarity, conventional clear light nature, and its knowing is its function. So you don't have to worry about the function right then. You're just concentrating on its nature. The function, the fact that you're knowing, the fact that you're meditating and you're experiencing something is indicative of the fact that that's its function, that it's knowing something, right? So you are observing the first of all, you observe the mental consciousness, and then you try to observe its nature. So you're not when you're observing its nature, you're not observing just the mental consciousness itself. You're observing its conventional nature, which is its lack of obstruction, its lack of impeding the entry or dissolution of the thoughts back into the consciousness.
But
And
doesn't that imply space?
So is that space?
I mean, it feels like there has to be space for something to come in and out.
So, Richard, is that lack of the impeding of thoughts entering and reabsorbing, is that space, the uncompounded space, akasha? I mean, the Sanskrit word, we say akasha, uncompounded space.
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Oh, come on. Yeah. So, it's interesting. We have, all of these things are material in your construction belt, like the guy or gal who comes to put the shingles on your house or fix your water heater or something. They have a belt around their waist with all sorts of tools. Okay. So these are things we need to remember. So space itself is the lack of obstructing contact. But in analogy to that, the mental consciousness is space-like in that it does not impede the movement of conceptions within it, but it is not that itself, that quality of the mind, that clear light nature of the mind, that aspect of the clear light nature of the mind is not uncompounded space. It is a quality of the mental consciousness. So also emptiness itself, Sean, emptiness, shunyata, is that uncompounded space?
Well, that's where my problem is because if I try to focus on emptiness, then that spaciousness arises, and I know that spaciousness is a concept. So there, I'm not in the emptiness anymore.
Yeah. So the spacious, the lack of
okay, the lack of obstruction, then
okay,
that's
so
still a concept.
Hold on. The lack of inherent existence when you're meditating on emptiness, you're apprehending the lack of inherent existence, the mere absence of that, the non-affirming negation. And we'll go over that again and again in the succeeding sections of Gompa Rapso when Lama Tsongkhapa is commenting on Chandrakirti's other sections. So this topic again comes up. But we've talked about it in the past. that is what's called a non-affirming negation or a mere negation, or how else do Chimpa and other people translate it? I can't remember.
A non-implicative negation.
Non-implicative negation. It doesn't imply anything in its negation. That itself is not space, but it is, when you're meditating on that, that's called space-like meditation on emptiness. Because what appears is something similar to what appears when you're meditating on non-compounded space, and is similar to what appears when you're meditating on the conventional clear light nature of the mind. All of them have a similar appearance. As you're noting, quite rightly, kind of like a spaciousness. But what is different about them is what process has induced that state, right? The logic of meditating on emptiness, when you've used, well, hopefully Vipassana and tranquil abiding in unison, to analyze that phenomena cannot be inherently existent because of this or that and so forth. You're analyzing, and then when you come to that conclusion that phenomena are not inherently existent, let's say, for instance, that phenomena are not produced from other, that was the topics we're still on here. At that point, when that clicks, then all of the intellectual apparatus stops, and all that appears to your mind is just the what's you say, the result, the implication of that, which is the non-existence of inherent existence, right? Which is at that point, inherent existence, not inherent existence, none of them are appearing to your mind. All there is spaciousness. And at that point, you're not thinking, oh, this is emptiness. You're not thinking, oh, what's the difference between this and my mental consciousness or uncompounded space? There are no thought processes at all, right? No conventional phenomena are appearing to you. No conventional phenomena are being attended to. What's different between the apprehension of emptiness and the apprehension of the clear light nature of the mind, or of the apprehension of uncompounded space, is the process that led up to that. All three of them are non-affirming negations. All three of them have the same appearance, nothingness, sort of. But they have all, when you arise from those states, you have an intellectual understanding of something different. When you arise from the state of having meditated on emptiness, which is non-conceptual, hopefully, to some degree, there is an understanding that what you just realized was emptiness. When you arise from meditation on uncompounded space, you realize that you have apprehended, you understand that you've realized the uncompounded space. You don't realize that you've understood emptiness at that point, right? Because what led up to it was a certain logic that led you to that nothingness. And then when you arise from that, there's a remembering consciousness of that experience and the logic that led up to it. Also, when you're meditating on the clear light nature of the mind, if you just have that experience of that nothingness, then when you arise from that, there is an understanding that the mind itself has this clear light nature, does not impede the arisal of thoughts and so forth. Okay, so think about that. I wanted to mention before we start one other thing. I'd mentioned before that I had erred in saying that Nagarjuna was the teacher of Saraha. Do you remember that? Actually, Saraha was the teacher of Nagarjuna. So I want to read this little entry. I think this is maybe from Wikipedia, excuse me, but still sort of summarizes certain points. Nagarjuna was born into a Brahmin family, probably around the mid-1st or early 2nd century CE. I guess that means Common Era or whatever. What does that, does that mean Common Era, or is there some other words? Okay.
Current era.
Again?
Yeah, common
Current.
error.
Current era.
Oh, current?
Current era.
I think it's,
Oh,
okay.
I didn't know that. Okay, current era, or maybe Common Era, in South India, in Vidarbha, a kingdom lying in present-day Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. So that part is controversial, whether Nagarjuna was born in that particular place. Anyway, someplace like that in India. He was predicted in various sutras, and we studied this in Gompa Rapsel and which was quoting the quotations from Madhyamakavatara, many quotations about the predictions in the sutras and in the tantras of the birth of Nagarjuna. He was predicted in various sutras, such as the Lankavatara Sutra, the Descent into Lanka Sutra, the Lankar Shekbe Do in Tibetan, among others. But there were many predictions about him. At birth, a soothsayer, I'm always interested in the etymology. What is a soothsayer? Do you know, Rachel, what a soothsayer is? Someone who says sooth?
I know the
So
Bene
is it-
Gesserits, truth sayers, but it's not the same.
No, soothsayer. Rachel is going to explain. Rachel?
I don't know the etymology, Venerable George, but it's the person that's like a fortune teller, telling the truth, kind of it's got that connotation, I think.
Right. So here we say, so the dictionary says a person able to foresee the future, from Middle English in the sense of a person who speaks the truth, or see the word sooth. Okay, so it is related with truthsayer. At birth, a soothsayer predicted that he would live only 7 days. But if his parents made offerings to 100 monks, he could live to 7 years old. Does that remind you of the story of someone else that we've studied before?
Is it Aryadeva or Asanga?
Was it Lamchen or Langchung? Remember these two eventual arhats, Big Path and Little Path. Both of them, when they were born, they were a soothsayer, someone who was, for whatever reason, was making predictions, said that they would live a short time, and the only way that they could prevent their eventual quick death was to make offerings to the beings on the highway, the holy beings that came by. And you remember the story from the Lamrim? Big Path and Little Path, right? So anyway, something similar. But if his parents made offerings to 100 monks, he could live to be 7 years old. This was about Nagarjuna. Fearing for his life, so they did that. So he lived to 7. And when he was approaching 7, his parents sent Nagarjuna to Nalanda monastery in North India, Nalanda Monastic University in North India, where he met the Buddhist master Saraha. So I had hoped that maybe Shanka, who's going to on his way traveling to Southern California with his family right now, said he'll listen to the recording later. So I wanted to remind him that in the various tantric rituals, what does Sara mean in Sanskrit? Paul, do you know what Sara means?
Doesn't mean ocean, but I'm not sure that's the same Sara.
No, this Sara means arrow.
Mm.
So
Oh,
like,
right.
we talk about the protection wheel around the mandala. There's something called Sarajvala. Or is not Jvala, Jala, Sarajala. What does that mean, Paul? Do you know? Jala.
It's not fence?
The web, yeah, the fence or web.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about the Brahma Jala Sutra, the web of Brahma or something like that, or the
Net or something.
a net of Brahma's net. So there's a protection wheel of arrows that are encircling the mandala to keep various kinds of beings that want to interfere out. You know, if they get in, if they try to go through that, they get impaled by these arrows. So Sara Jala. Anyway, he was where he was met by the Buddhist master Saraha. Saraha told him that if he became a renunciate and recited the Amitabha mantra, Mintu, this is the mantra that we gave at Mintu's request, we gave the oral transmission of several weeks ago, so maybe a month or so, or a month and a half ago here in class, the Amitabha mantra. Actually, it was sometimes called the Amitabha mantra, but it is actually the mantra of this deity that is sometimes called Amitabha or Amitayos. If he recited this mantra, he would live a long life. So two things here. If he became a renunciate, if he took ordination, and he recited this mantra, that he would have a long life. So that's sometimes mentioned to people that have some life-threatening event, some disease or something like that. If they were to take ordination, that can impede, that can eliminate that obstacle of the shortness of their life. When I left Italy, I mentioned, I had taught there lived there, and helped at the center, taught some courses for maybe 7.5 years. And I mentioned to some of the older students who I'd known a long time, who were like myself, beginning to age, why didn't they think of taking ordination? Most of them were lay people in the community, business people or, responsible positions in life. And I don't know if anyone ever took me up on that. I don't think my speech has that much power to persuade people, but I would say the same thing to our class. Why not? Those of you like Shanka and others, why not become a renunciate? To take ordination vows, because that's the supreme way of practicing, and also can overcome any obstacles to your long life. So anyway, Saraha told him that if he became a renunciate and recited the Amitabha mantra, he would lead a long life. Nagarjuna did so. Boy, he lived a long time. Supposedly, according to this, Tibetan tradition, he lived, 600 years or something? Paul,
yeah, they say 600 years.
600 years, like that. So, of course, Western scholars say, no one can live 600. So Nagarjuna did so and joined the monastery, receiving the name Sri Manta. At Nalanda, Nagarjuna studied Sutra and Tantra with Ratnamati, an emanation of Manjushri. So he studied Tantra and Sutra. and he studied with Saraha, the Guhya Samaja in particular. So Nagarjuna is famed for having written a very famous commentary to that Paul and John Campbell have especially studied, I think, various versions of that. In addition, he learned alchemy from a Brahmin and gained the ability to transmute iron into gold. I'm surprised Wikipedia has this as though it's just like, of course. Using this ability, he was able to feed the Nalanda monks during famine. So that was one of his famous actions, one of his famous activities, being able to feed the monks at Nalanda. Kind of like Lama Zopa Rinpoche being able to feed the monks at Sera Monastery, or the three great monasteries, through his generosity, not so much through alchemy, but through his charismatic accumulation of wealthy donors, the Richard Gere's and the wealthy European, Asian and other donors. Eventually, Nagarjuna became abbot of Nalanda. There he expelled 8,000 monks who were not keeping the Vinaya monastic rules of discipline properly. He also defeated 500 non-Buddhists in debate. These are kind of the highlights according to Wikipedia. So one of the texts that I translated for Lama Zopa Rinpoche was a very short text by Nagarjuna praying that he would never become, that he would, in all his future lives, he would never be forced into being a disciplinarian again. Here he had expelled what did I say, 5,000 monks or something like that. And this is a very famous prayer, and it is a cause for ourselves to think also, if you're in the position to make rules that other people have to follow, that is very problematic situation. If you err in any way, there are, especially in the monastic institute and so forth, there are all sorts of very heavy negative consequences of that for yourself and negative consequences for the people that you make these unjust rules for and so forth. Okay. Enough of that. Let's get back to our text. So, we had reached a point here in our text, as Sister Doris had reminded me this morning, in Jimpa's text, page 254, if you've got the written text, and in now the section, the text we had by Jeffrey Hopkins in the final exposition of emptiness has finished just in the paragraph before this, which we're going to review in a second. But so we're using the FPMT translation by Venerable Joan, and in that, page 139. You all have that text, right? No? Don, you don't have that text by Venerable Joan?
No.
Okay. So that was a text that we started off at the beginning, at some point when we started the 6th chapter, the 6th Bhumi. We had the text by Anne Klein and Jeffrey Hopkins, and we also had Venerable Jones' translation. So she translated the Gompa Rapsal, and so that was another alternative that we could have been reading when we read Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, but Jeffrey's was so much more precise. We just skipped that. So you might want to download that. Doris, where is that? Can he find that on the Shantideva site?
It's in the Dropbox in the protected materials folder. Thank you, Richard.
So Richard has just posted something about that, I take it?
No, I think Richard posted it there long ago.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
looking for it now.
Okay.
You remember the title of it? Does somebody have the title? And I'll post the link.
It should say something like FPMT Masters Program.
No, it says FPMT Illumination Venerable Joan PDF, the one that I have.
Stephen has just shared it.
Okay, so you can have that. So that's where we're going to be beginning. So just to finish up from what we were talking about last time. Okay, Rachel. What is meant by the supreme seeing is no seeing? Kind of summarizing what we were talking about just before this.
So when the Buddha is engaging in direct realization of ultimate truth or emptiness or suchness, there is no conventional reference either to the agent, object, or action. So there's no seeing happening. So you can't say that the Buddha is seeing emptiness, even though that is, that is from the ultimate point. There's no when the Buddha is doing that, there's no Buddha doing that. There's no actor. There's no emptiness being seen. That's a non-dual situation.
What do you think, Richard? Does that sound right?
I'm sorry, Venerable. I was still trying to find the text. I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, take your time. Take your time. So the supreme seeing, Nadine, do you agree with Rachel? Supreme seeing is no seeing?
For me, this is like a koan. I keep thinking about it. And but I noted in my book what you said. The best seeing, the supreme seeing, means seeing emptiness.
Okay.
And not seeing means not seeing conventionalities. So the
Right.
supreme.
Right. So very simply, Rachel has given more elaboration on it, which is all correct, but sort of just in the simplest sense, that means that when the Buddha or even Arya beings who are not Buddha have a direct realization of emptiness, they are perceiving emptiness, right? Conventionally, you can say they are perceiving emptiness. They are, or quote, seeing emptiness. But what they are not seeing is any conventional phenomena. In sort of related to Sean's question earlier, in perceiving emptiness, there is kind of a sense of not spaciousness, but just the direct perception of a non-affirming negation. That means that there is, what has impelled that realization is that non-inherent existence does not exist. That conclusion is a non-affirming negation. It doesn't imply that there's any other kind of existence that does exist, conventional existence. So what appears to that consciousness, in the perspective of that consciousness, remember the terminology that's directly perceiving emptiness, conventional phenomena do not appear at all in the perspective of that. So in the last line of that, just before that, where we're going to be beginning now, the last line of the section on the two truths translated in the final exposition of emptiness that Jeffrey Hopkins translated, in that it says, in Jimpa's translation, it says, in view of this, the rejection of arising from other is done from the perspective of Aryas. So it doesn't say from the perspective of Buddha, from the perspective of Aryas. That means people who've directly realized emptiness. It cannot be invalidated by perspectives stemming from the everyday world, or from the world. Jeffrey's, that was the last sentence in the last paragraph in Jeffrey's text. In that, Jeffrey translated on page 62, 262. In that case, in actuality, only superiors are valid with respect to contemplating suchness. Non-superiors are not actually valid. So just interesting, in Venerable Jones' translation that I mentioned we're going to be using for a while now, she said, therefore, with respect to the thought of suchness, Jeffrey translated it, when contemplating suchness, explicitly superiors alone are valid. Jeffrey translated it as actually, or in actuality, are not superior. In actuality, only superiors are valid. So he takes this in actuality. She says explicitly. I think in actuality is more correct. In that case, in actuality, only superiors are valid with respect to contemplating suchness. Non-superiors are not actually valid. Those people who are not yet Arya beings, even bodhisattvas and hearers and solitary realizers on the non-Arya paths, on the path of accumulation and path of preparation, they are not actually valid with respect to suchness. Hence, the world does not damage, or in other words, does not invalidate the refutation of production from others in the perspective of a superior's perspective, a perception of emptiness, of suchness. What does that mean? So for Arya beings, phenomena do not arise from others. That's from the perspective of an Arya's meditative absorption into emptiness, right? In their perspective, phenomena do not arise from others. So when we talk about phenomena arising from others conventionally, that's talking about something else. But for the world to say phenomena do arise from others, that does not invalidate the Arya being's perception. They are valid with respect to that. So Jeffrey said, hence the world, or as Jimpa said, everyday world. Hence the world does not damage, that is to say, does not invalidate the refutation of production from others. So from the Nagarjuna's point of view, from in emptiness, with respect to the ultimate, phenomena are not produced from others. And that assertion, that phenomena are not produced from others, is not damaged in any way by the world saying, oh yeah, things are produced from others, seed produces sprout and so forth. That does not invalidate the Arya's perception. Okay, so that's where we're at. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense? So next section in Jimpa's translation. Objections to the assertion that worldly perception invalidates the refutation of arising from others. So the last sentence just said, it is not invalidated by the perspective of the world, but here now there's some objections to that. Okay, we just, that was the conclusion of the previous section. now, and in Jones' text, Venerable Jones' text, the FPNT text, it says, indicating that which invalidates the harm by the world to the refutation of production from others. So that's a little more obscure the way that Jones translated it. Jim Finch says, objections to the assertion that worldly perception invalidates the refutation of arising from others. Making sense? Do you see where we are, Don? Okay, so now these two famous stanzas, 630 and 631, I think, are part of 631. In Jimpa's translation, if ordinary perception were to constitute valid knowledge, let's see what that is. So here, ordinary, again, it's jikten, it's worldly. So if worldly perception were to constitute pramana, valid knowledge, right? Suchness would be seen by common folk. So that's talking about if the ordinary perception, if worldly perception of ordinary beings were to be valid with respect to ultimate truth, valid in all ways and would cover ultimate truth, then suchness or emptiness, the ultimate mode of phenomena, would be seen by common folk. Okay, then the text continues. What need for the Aryas then? Why would we need Aryas then? It's a little bit ambiguous what's being said there. And what need for the Arya paths? And then the fourth line of that says, yet it's wrong to take the foolish mind as valid as well. Again, in Jimpa's translation, leaves a little bit uncertainty of what's being meant. Then the first two lines of the next stanza, 631, so these are stanzas from Madhyamakavatara Karakas, right? Since ordinary perception has no validity in every respect, ordinary perception, worldly perception, has no validity in every respect. It has certain validity in the world, right? But not in every respect. Since that, no worldly perspective can invalidate the context of suchness. Those are the two stanzas. Do they make sense to you, Richard? I mean, sorry. Yeah, Richard.
It does, but it's very convoluted.
Yeah, but
one of the things I was thinking about doing, but I didn't have time, was to kind of translate this into a statement I can understand. But I get it. I just can't articulate it.
What in New York? What do you say? What do you speak in New York? New Yorkish?
I guess so.
In Singapore, people say they speak Singlish. So Singapore English, so
Yorkshire.
Yorkshire, New Yorkshire. Yeah. So let's get some alternatives here to this translation. So first of all, although Jeffrey's translation of Yompa Rapsel ended at the two truths, Paul Hackett here, our class member, very kindly forwarded me some other a compendium he made of various translations Jeffrey and other people did of succeeding karikas. Some of them are found in random sources. Some of them are found in a particular text. What is it called? The yak herders. What was it called, Paul?
Yeah, so John Powers, who was one of Jeffrey's graduate students, had a bunch of Australia National Research Council grants to translate various texts. And they published them, the ones on India, they published as cowherds, and then the ones on Tibetan texts they published as yak herds, which is sort of the authorial collective name. And so this is from, I believe that's from one of the yak herd volumes, which was, I think, translation of Tsong and then the refutation of Tsong by Jamyang Sheba and
Okay.
was it Akulojo Gyatso? I can't remember.
We'll talk more about
Or
those
Panchen Lama, yeah.
Daksang and his qualms and so forth. But anyway, do you get the subtlety of the two titles? Cow herders talking about the Indian texts. Yak herders or yak herd herder was talking about the Tibetan text because the yak is more is very prominent in Tibet. What's the origin of why did they choose cow herders for that collection of the translation of Indian texts, Paul?
I believe the first one was supposed to be because the subject was conventional valid cognition. And there's a line that says something about not disputing the view of a cow herd or something like that.
Right. So cow herd doesn't mean a herd of cows. It means an individual who is herding the cows. That's why I add the word ers at the end, cow herders. Maybe it's actually cow herd. But so in talking about conventional reality, sort of sometimes one thinks that Chandrakirti was being totally either misogynistic when he said, even ladies can understand, even women can understand, or it was being racist or not racist, what would a casteist in saying that even cow herders can understand. The point being, people that are not trained in philosophy, like us, can even understand certain things. So that's why that set of texts was called cowherds. So you can find those texts. I think they're still available on Amazon, Paul, cowherds and yak herds. So they might, if you're, if you're expecting a big income tax return or something, you might decide to get those texts. So anyway, in a different text completely that had a translation by Jeffrey Hopkins. His translation of the first part of that was, if worldly perception were valid, the world would see reality, whereby therefore, of what purpose would deeds by others, meaning superior beings, Arya beings, of what purpose would there be deeds by others, superiors, by way of the superior path? So this is getting another interpretation of that. Another translation of that,
right, so that was Betsy Knapper's translation that she did with Jeffrey.
Okay, so what is EE translated?
I think that should be EN, Elizabeth Napper.
No, EE, page 161. This is his next one.
Oh. That would be, wait a minute, EE.
Okay, anyway, I'll read this one. If everyday experience were authoritative, were pramana, this is talking about the same thing, then common people would perceive the reality, and then in brackets, expressed in the truth of highest meaning. They would perceive reality. They would perceive shunyata. What necessity would there be for those others, comma, the saints, meaning translating Aryas as saints, and what would be accomplished by following their path? It is unreasonable for such foolishness to be accepted as entirely authoritative. And then a translation of that same verse from the Yak Herds, if you were keeping track on page 229 of that. If ordinary people were epistemic warrants,
That's their translation of valid
then
cognition.
ordinary people would perceive reality. So epistemic warrants, that sounds vaguely like
That's from Jay Garfield.
Jay Garfield. What does that make sense to you? Where did Suvansh leave us? Is he still here? I guess Suvansh had to leave. Okay. What does that sound like to you, Mikhail? Epistemic warrants.
Epistemic would be about the science of knowing.
Right.
Epistemology.
We're talking about pramana, yeah, valid cognition.
But warrant, is it a guarantee or something like that?
Yeah, right. Something like that. So if ordinary people were epistemic warrants, then ordinary people would perceive reality. This is a little too much philosophical talk there. And if that were the case, what need would there be to obtain the alternative state of the noble ones? Okay, that makes sense. What function would the noble path have? That is why the naive world are not considered epistemic resources. Okay. And then for the next verse.
Sorry, Venerable George, could you just repeat the last sentence again?
Yeah.
It sounded interesting.
Two parts. What function would the noble path then have? That is why the naive are not considered epistemic resources. So again, couching it in terminology of Western philosophy, epistemic warrants and epistemic resources and so forth. You get the gist from the earlier translation. If worldly perception were valid, the world would see reality, right? And it's not. Of what purpose, then if that were the case, what purpose would there be the deeds by others, superiors, by way of the superior path? Okay. And then the second verse, 161, everyday experience is not authoritative in every respect, and therefore it does not contradict the reality. It does not contradict reality. Or the Yak Herder says, it is because ordinary people are not epistemic warrants in all respects that ordinary people pose no epistemic challenge to reality. Okay, you get the picture. So those two verses are very famous. So what are we getting at here? For a long time, through the section on the two truths, the main thing that was being refuted was production from others. And production from others, Nagarjuna says, is not talking about conventional production. It's just talking about the assumption to the world when you say production from others. The assumption in the world's mind is that it means production from inherently existent others, although it's not stated and it doesn't need to be stated. So all of that production from others was refuted, right? Rejected. In the process of, refuting production, if things are not produced from self, they're not produced from others, they're not produced from both self and others, they're not produced causelessly. Therefore, in the perception of Sean, who's meditating on this, then that means they're not produced at all. There's just going to be a non-affirming negation that appears to the mind when one is realizing the emptiness that is the non-production, non-inherent production. What do you think, Richard?
You're muted, Richard.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize he was.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No.
I was thinking just in about 631 A and B that there's this substantially different translation with FPMT than there is for all the others, and which one is valid?
Okay, so good. So let's look at Venerable Jones' translation, the FPMT translation that some of you just downloaded now, some of you had before. So this is on page 139 near the bottom, and she has the karikas in what is it called? Is it called italic? Sort of slanted text. If the world were valid, right? If ordinary perception constitutes valid knowledge, Jimpa said, if the world were valid, since worldly beings would see suchness, what need would there be? And then she has in brackets, for it to be seen, unbracket, by others, the superiors. So what need would there be? What need would there be for superiors, Arya beings? What could be done by a superior's path? The foolish as valid is not even feasible. Or as Jimpa said, yet it is wrong to take the foolish mind as valid as well. And the first two lines of 631 of Venerable Joan translates, therefore, in all aspects, the world is not valid, or the world is not valid in all ways. It's valid in certain ways, but not in all ways, not in terms of emptiness. Because of that, in the context of suchness, there is no harm from the world. So this word harm, in Tibetan we say nupa, it is being translated as in various ways here. Jimpa translated it as no worldly perspective can invalidate. So if something harms your logical argument, if something were to harm your argument, that would invalidate your argument, right? That's the sense of different translations of invalidate or harm. Does that help, Richard?
Not really. I was focused on the phrase in all aspects, because to me at least, in Venerable Jones' translation, in all aspects the world is not valid. That seems to me to say in every aspect, in all encompassing, there isn't an exception in which the world is valid.
Okay.
But Jimpa's translation seems to have has no validity in every respect, meaning in some respects it might have validity.
Right. Good
Like
observation.
they contradict each other.
So as we are settling on the translations we prefer that resonate with us, that seem to imply the correct meaning, I think you centered on a good point there, that I think in that respect, Jimpa's translation looks a little bit better there. Other ones, let's see, what did we say? That was the 631. So yeah, what was that? Oh, emptiness.
I think that might be elaborations on emptiness, which is Don Lopez's translations of commentaries on the Heart Sutra.
Maybe that's it, yeah. Everyday experience is not authoritative in every respect, and therefore does not contradict the reality expressed in the truth of the highest meaning. Or in the Yak Herders, it is because ordinary people are not epistemic warrants in all respects.
And that for me seems to be clear based on the commentary that follows, but
in all respects. And Venerable Jones said, therefore, in all aspects, or if you change the order, the world is not valid in all aspects, in all respects, in every respect. Yeah, so yeah, that's right. So what is implying is that the world is valid in its own domain about conventionalities, but it is not valid in the realm of emptiness. Louise, what do you think?
Venerable George, I was wondering if you're ready for the break.
Yeah, let's take a very short break. I'll keep my microphone on, get some tea, take a relaxing break, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you. So Anna and Louise, I see you're still there with Sean, so you can debate with Sean, or if Sean feels really energetic, he can debate with you.
Well, I thought I might share something that I've encountered, that it was brought to my attention from a Buddhist podcast that is actually quite good, but I can't tell if it's being created by AI, but it's actually really quite good. But it mentioned this scientific finding that I studied genetics, and so it mentioned something about memory being stored in DNA. And so, I mean, there is an epigenetic kind of phenomenon that happens, but
But that's not.
this was a different kind of thing that it was mentioning. And I found this review paper that was talking about the research that this guy was mentioning, which would put a big dent in people's argument that the mind is, or consciousness is an emergent, or solely an emergent quality of the brain, because there was a research thing that was done that sounds really fascinating, where this guy had a heart transplant.
Have appeared. Okay, so I think the recording stopped just, it went on after we started the break and had some provocative argument by Sean or someone sort of left mid-sentence when it, so those of you who are listening to the recording weren't privy to that. Anyway, so we're back again. So these two verses, or this verse and a half now, is in response to the Prasangika essentially saying that phenomena are not produced from others. And this is authoritative. This is how the Aryas see it. And now there are objections to that. So again, Jimpa translated, if ordinary perception constitutes valid knowledge, suchness would be seen by common folk. Jimpa says will be seen, but I think would be seen by common folk is a better way, it's by the world. What need for the Aryas then? What need would there be for Arya paths? Yet it is wrong to take the foolish mind as valid as well. Since ordinary perception has no validity in every respect, no worldly perspective can invalidate the context of suchness. So that's the verses. So now Lama Tsongkhapa is commenting on Chandrakirti's commentary on that. Okay, so now, so Jimpa's translation says, now the opponent might wish to raise objections from the perspective of the everyday world, right? The cow herds, to be really, to play into the political discussion at the present, women. Those of you who are not in the United States may not understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, now the opponent might wish to raise objections from the perspective of the everyday world to the refutation of arising from others on the ultimate level. So you understand what that sentence means. the world, they might want to say, opponent might want to say, opponent of the present Kika might want to say, the world does not refute the arising of others. So that would seem to harm the present Kika event, statement that that phenomena do not arise from others. The text continues, had we here admitted that perceptions of the everyday world were authoritative, were pramana, were valid in the sphere of inquiring into the nature of suchness, if we had admitted that, if we would accept a priori, for the sake of argument, such objections might be appropriate. And then if you notice in his text, his translation, Jimpa has certain words are in bold, and those bold words like if ordinary perception constitutes valid knowledge. If ordinary perception constitutes valid knowledge is in bold, because that reflects back to the wording of the karika. You can always find, Jimpa's tried to do that so that you could see what Lama Tsongkhapa was commenting on the karikas. If ordinary perception constitutes valid knowledge, with respect to suchness would then be seen or directly realized by common worldly folk. And given that this situation would have to have been true since beginningless time, one would then have to admit that common people, the world, who are devoid of philosophical investigations, just looking on the everyday world, one would have to admit that common people have eliminated ignorance because they would have realized suchness, emptiness from beginningless time. If they've realized emptiness, meaning validly, maybe you could argue about whether there've been direct perception or not since beginningless time. But anyway, if they've realized it since beginningless time, one would have to admit that common people have eliminated ignorance. Because if ignorance is that which is eliminated by realizing emptiness, right? Is the object of one of the objects of negation. What kind of object of negation is that? Do you know what I'm talking about, Mikhail?
Of reason? You mean that of?
Is it the object of negation of reason?
Of reasoning, yeah.
I don't think so. The object of negation of reasoning is something that doesn't exist. The object of negation of reasoning is inherent existence, right? Paul, what is ignorance? What kind of object negation of that?
That's a good question. Well, it exists.
Yeah, ignorance exists.
So it is.
So it's different than inherent existence, which is the object of negation of reasoning.
Right.
But it's still an object of negation of experience.
Yeah, of experience or of the path.
Of the path. Yeah. So that's slightly different. So it is an object of negation. So it would have been eliminated had sentient beings realized emptiness from beginningless time. We would all be free of ignorance now. We wouldn't, and as a result, we wouldn't have anger and attachment and so forth, which is not the case, as you know. In that case, Jimpa continues translating, what need is there for the Aryas then, who are others? So others here means other than the ordinary world. So the perception of Aryas is something diverse from, other than the perception of worldly beings who don't analyze emptiness. In that case, what need would there be? He says, is there? What need would there be for the Aryas then, who are others, comma, for direct realization of suchness? There wouldn't be any need for Aryas, who are other than the worldly beings, to realize suchness, because the world would have realized suchness since beginningless time. And continuing, what need would there be for seeking the Arya paths? You know, the whole enterprise of Buddhism, whether it be the Hinayana or Mahayana, talking about the necessity to seek the Arya paths, to have direct realization of emptiness in order to eliminate the afflictions and so forth, to either reach your own nirvana, your own deliverance, or in order eventually to achieve enlightenment for the sake of others. There'd be no need for that, because people would have realized emptiness from the beginning. When I rephrase Jimpa's translation into the would as opposed to will, when he says, in that case, what need is there? When I translate it, rephrase it as would there be, is that a legitimate rephrasing, Paul, from the Tibetan?
The Tibetan is Jishuk de Migue. It says what necessary, or what need would there be, or it would not be necessary. So, I mean, there's no will or would. So I think both of those are being bracketed in.
Yeah. So if you say will there be, that's to me that implies that's happening now. Will there be? Would there be? It means it's
just it's a hypothetical. It's a subjunctive.
hypothetical,
Yeah.
right? And what need is there then for seeking the Arya paths? There would be no point in doing so. There will be no point in doing so sounds like that's a possibility. There would be no point in doing so. Yet it is wrong to take the foolish mind of ordinary beings, ordinary people, as valid with respect to suchness as well, since ordinary perception has no validity in every respect in the context of inquiring into suchness. No worldly perspective can invalidate the contexts. No worldly perspective can invalidate our assertions in the context of suchness. When it says ordinary perception has no validity in every respect in the context of inquiring into suchness, Stephen, does ordinary perception have any validity in any respect in the context of inquiring into suchness?
I would say yes here, Venerable George, because you could make, inferences and logic about emptiness, but you couldn't realize it directly.
Right. All of your analysis, even if it's called ultimate analysis, is still utilizing ordinary perception and so forth. It does have validity in some respect, but not in every respect, not in the actual perception of emptiness directly, but certainly in the logic that leads up to that, that conclusion, it's not, phenomena are not produced from self, they're not produced from others. First of all, if phenomena were produced, they'd have to be produced from self, others, both self and others, or neither. Having that kind of understanding, that's all using conventional mind. Then it's not produced from self, It's not produced from others, using the conventional logic in certain respects on that, not produced from both self and others, not produced causelessly. But then the actual perception, the direct perception of emptiness that arises from those conclusions does not involve ordinary perception. So since ordinary perception has no validity in every respect, so that excludes that final one, in the context of inquiring to suchness, no worldly perspective can invalidate in the context of suchness. Or as Venerable Jones says, let's see here, where is that? That's in the middle of that. If a seer of the world were valid with respect to suchness, reading Venerable Joan at the bottom of page 139, if a seer of the world, perception of the worldly beings, were valid with respect to suchness, since normal worldly beings would directly see, that is, realize suchness. So there she's pointing out directly see. And in addition, they would have directly realized it from beginningless cyclic existence, whereby ignorance would have to be asserted to have been abandoned. As a result of that, what need would there be for suchness to be directly realized by others? For instance, the Aryas, the superiors. There would be no purpose, there'd be no need. Also, what could be done, or what would be done by seeking a superior's path, the Arya path? There would be no purpose. There would be, no need. The foolish, who are normal worldly beings, to consider them as valid with respect to suchness is not even feasible. Therefore, in the context of analyzing suchness in all aspects, which is what I think Richard or someone else had sort of criticized, the all aspects, in every respect, in all aspects, that is, in every way, a seer of the world is not valid. Or to put it at the end of the sentence, the world is not valid with respect to suchness in every way. It's valid to, in conventional analysis leading up to the direct realization, but it's not valid in the direct perception. Because of that, in the context of suchness, there is no harm from the world. Okay, are we all together? Yeah, Richard, what do you think?
Venerable Jones' explanation is, I think, very clear. The question I have is why the ambiguity in Chandrakirti? Was there a rhyme form or some sort of formal reason for him to not, for example, include a phrase like as valid with respect to suchness, or in the context of analyzing suchness? Why didn't Chandrakirti include a phrase like that, which would make his meaning a lot more clear?
I remember our classes with Geshe Tekchok at Manjushri Institute when we were studying various texts with him. and he would say, at a point like this, you have to ask Maitreya, you have to ask Manjushri, or in this case, you'd have to ask Chandrakirti. Why did he write it like this? So one can make some kind of reasoned analysis. The karikas had to be easily remembered. They had to be short.
Right.
If they included all of the details which were in the commentary, in the Bhasham, they wouldn't be easily remembered. There were many Tibetan monks and nuns memorize not only the karakas, but also the basham, but that was more difficult. Just to remember, how many are there, Paul? 250, I don't know how many stanzas there are in the Majjhima Uttara altogether. To memorize them and to be able to recite them from memory is a daunting task. So the verses have to be concise, and sometimes just one word in that verse, when you elaborate it, it has all these other details. So I agree with you that it's frustrating that he didn't say explicitly there, but there are reasons for brevity. Many different levels of reasoning you can say. Also, sometimes to make things a little bit more obscure. Geshe Tekchok used to say that if the texts were completely transparent, so he was talking about texts in general, not just the root verses, but if the text was completely transparent and didn't really need any commentary, you wouldn't seek out an oral commentary to explain it. You wouldn't seek out a teacher to explain the meaning of it because it would be all there. And so he was implying that sometimes that's the intention of the author, to leave it ambiguous so that you would necessarily seek a guru, a teacher, to explain it. So there's all different levels of possible reasoning, but in the end, as Geshe Tekchok would say, you have to ask Chandrakirti why he wrote it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just that in reading the translations of the fundamental wisdom by Nagarjuna, there's a rhyme scheme, and there's a very, very, very strict one that you can see. I was just curious whether or not that was one of the constraints, and what you're saying makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so the rhyming also could be a factor here. And what's the other thing? Rhythm. What is it called, Paul? Not rhythm.
Well, it's
Meter.
poetic meter.
So there are two considerations in addition to what I've just mentioned before, to Richard's very good question. There's a constraint in the is rhyme the right word? What is it? What's the technical word?
I thought it was.
I'm not sure so much rhyme, so much as there's a stylistic.
The things they have a certain kind of maybe stylist. In some cases, there's a rhyming of the words, especially in Tibetan, but and in the Sanskrit that doesn't come across in translation. But also the meter and so forth. In order to keep that meter, you'd have to choose certain words and possibly omit certain words, which in your consideration as the author, you would say people will understand through the commentary and through seeking oral commentary to a guru. But good point. So let's just read a little bit ahead here. So in Jimpa's translation, let's read this next section. Some, taking the phrase, quote, since ordinary perception has no validity in every respect, unquote. Some people who take that phrase as a rejection of any notion of valid cognition, going to the extreme that there's no valid cognition in ordinary perception as a result of ordinary perception. They criticize this system of Chandrakirti as an inferior tradition. This tradition of Chandrakirti. So this is a verse from Chandrakirti's text implying that ordinary perception has no validity in every respect. And they're exaggerating that to mean maybe in any respect. That's wrong. for them, they would like to say that there is some validity, and therefore Chandrakirti's tradition is inferior because he's implying that there's no validity at all. But that's not what Chandrakirti was saying. Others, on the other hand, citing the same reason, extol it as an excellent system. That is to say, they say that they use the same reason that there's no valid cognition at all in Chandrakirti's tradition, and they say, oh, that's good. So both of these people are wrong. Yeah, Mikhail, what do you think?
Would that second assertion be like Hashang? Thinking that ordinary mind has no validity at all? Or
Could be, that could be one, that could be one, but there are many, many other possibilities of people saying that that for prasangika, there is no exception of valid cognition in many sort of the intricate ways. So, but you could say Hashan is an example of that, yeah. Both interpretations make assertions, reading Jimpa again, both interpretations make assertions without properly understanding the standpoint of this master. They make assertions without understanding Chandrakirti's actual position, thus revealing their own true selves. Or as Venerable Jones says, what does she say? Therefore, because their respective presentations are limited with regard to presenting a seer of the world is not valid in all aspects with respect to suchness, they understand Chandrakirti as not asserting a seer of the world is valid in general. No, wait, what did she just say here? Although they are both valid, although there are both those who say, quote, stating in all aspects the world is not valid, which is the first line of 631. There are those that say that that demonstrates that this system of Chandrakirti does not assert a seer of the world, worldly conventional cognition, as valid at all. Therefore, that system, moreover, is not pure. And there are others that say, therefore, this system is excellent. They are similarly said to not realize the assertion of this master Chandrakirti. Therefore, because their respective presentations are limited with regard to presenting a seer of the world as not valid in all aspects with respect to suchness, they understand Chandrakirti as not asserting a seer of the world is valid in general. I'm not sure what, there was some reason here. Others citing the same reason, reading Jimpa, extol it as an excellent system. Both interpretations make assertions without properly understanding the standpoint of this master, thus revealing their own true selves. I don't see thus revealing their own true selves in the Tibetan or in Venerable Jones translation. So I'm not sure what Jimpa is meaning by that. Thus,
Venerable George, I think the own true selves, that's the Rangi Deni Dumpa Tsamdu Zede.
right.
That's what he's translating as they're revealing Dumba, their own true selves, Rangi Deni.
Right. So does Venerable Joan have that in her translation?
Not really. I think she's taking that as therefore because their respective presentations are limited. Because I think she's taking the Tsamdudze as limited and Rangi Deni as their own presentations, perhaps. Dumba, Rangi Deni, their own presentations are Tsamdudze limited.
Right.
Whereas Jimba is saying I guess he's not really translating the Tsamdudze, which I guess you could just say it merely is the case that they reveal Dumpa, their Rangi Deni, their own true selves.
Right. So I think maybe there's a reason to say that Venerable Jones' translation has maybe a better take on that. Therefore, because their respective presentations are limited with regard to presenting a seer of the world is not valid in all aspects with respect to suchness, they understand Chandrakirti is not asserting a seer of the world is valid in general. Okay. Anyway, so something for you to look at. Reading Jimpa again, this is because both parties that make these two assertions apparently take the statement that worldly perspectives are never authoritative in every respect when it comes to suchness to mean that valid cognition cannot be accepted in any context. Insofar as valid cognition and its objects are concerned, these must be understood in Chandrakirti's system as they are explained in his clear words, the clearly worded prasanapada, where valid cognitions and their objects are negated as existing by virtue of an essence. Valid cognition and their objects are refuted as existing inherently, but are presented instead as mutually defined. That is, the valid cognition and their objects are defining one another mutually. I will expound on this more below. And in that context, Jimpa has that note, that note 469, that refers to page 350, which is coming up, rebutting objections concerning other direct perceptions and inferential cognition. Okay, so we're getting into some weeds there. So basically what it's saying here is that, let's read back to that. Insofar as valid cognition, pramana, the analysis of, let's say, valid cognition. What kinds of how many different kinds of valid cognitions are there, Nadine? Do you know?
Valid pramana, there are a valid person, valid consciousness, a valid sound.
Okay, so yeah, so it's good for us to review again. So valid cognitions are of how many types, Paul?
Well, this is one of those points of contention, right? Because Dharmakirti says there's two, perception and inference, but there's passages in Chandrakirti where he says you could use four, the Nyaya, perception, inference, authority, and analogy.
Yeah, generally we say, let's say when we study low rig and so forth, there are three kinds. There's direct perceptions, valid direct perceptions, valid inferential cognizers, and that deal respectively with manifest phenomena and hidden phenomena, right? Deeply hidden phenomena are managed by what kind of valid perception?
Only an omniscient consciousness, so a Buddha.
No, what we're talking about, ordinary being can use that you prove that the the assertion of the omniscient mind, the assertion in the sutra of certain things that when you give this certain person who gave bread to the Buddha will become a pratika Buddha in this world and that world. Those are deeply hidden phenomena, and those are understood by the valid cognition that that the speaker was a valid person. Okay, so those generally we say there are three kinds of valid cognitions. So here, so to say that, or some people to say that ordinary perception has no validity in any respect at all, is denigrating these kinds of things that Chandrakirti himself accepts to a certain degree. They are not valid perception, pramana, as a subject, and its objects are not inherently existing as is assumed in the pramana vartaka. Chandrakirti would criticize the pramana vartaka in that respect, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist on the relational level. Remember, when we talk about conventional truth, we say it has various meanings. Samvriti satya, it means that is truth for an obscuring mind. It is truth conventionally for the conventions of the world. It is truth, and thirdly, it is truth relatively. That something is big in relationship to something else. So the subject of the pramana, of the valid cognition, is defined in relationship to its object. That's the last sentence here. Objects that, what does it say? Insofar as valid cognition and its object are concerned, these must be understood in Chandrakirti's system as they are explained in the Prasanapada, where valid cognitions and their objects are negated as existing by virtue of their essence, of an inherent existence, but are presented instead as mutually defined. I will expound on this more below. So if you want to take a look, that can be found in the written edition of Jimpa's text on page 350. Jimpa's note 469 just says, it says page 350. So if you go to that section, or if you search in the electronic version, that section is titled Rebutting Objections Concerning Other Direct Perceptions and Inferential Cognition. So we'll come up to that later when our minds are relaxed and free of all of the tiredness that is in there now. Okay, so we're going to end there. Next time we're going to begin with the context and manner in which worldly perspectives can invalidate. Remember, it was said before, worldly cognitions can't invalidate in the sphere of emptiness, but they can invalidate in a certain sphere, in the conventional sphere, and that is what we'll be talking about next time. So before we end, how are you feeling? Confused? Okay. Sean gave 2 thumbs up, Trump style. I hope I don't see him in some photo with Trump like that. Rachel, how do you feel? You look a little forlorn.
I'm quite tired. My brain is full.
Okay, that's good. Oh, Mintu has a question.
Yeah, I mean, this is
See you in the rainforest there.
yeah. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I see. So I think one of the things that sometimes I think about, maybe because we mentioned like politics a couple of times. So I was thinking that, like, is it possible that like President Trump, according to Buddhist theory, in one of his recent past life, he was a really good person, because he has all this like money and wealth and power and hell, he eat like really bad food, but he's still very strong. And so it must be that in according to Buddhist theory, he was a really good person in a recent past life, but somehow in this current life, he according to some configuration, he's not doing like good things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. So I don't like to use the word Buddhist theory. That sounds like, there's all these theories and we're going to just, as Buddhists, we like to believe that this is a reflection of the law of karma. There's no possibility of experiencing a result without having created the cause. So what kind of result is Trump experiencing? Well, many different results. Wealth to a certain degree, and that's dubious, right? Popularity, that can, to a certain degree, again, it's less than 50%, but incredibly energetic followers, different kinds of things like this. There's no way that he could experience that without having created the cause. So in previous lives, he must have created the cause to experience wealth and the way that one creates that karma is by giving. But it sounds like he must have given, well, it looks like he must have given with many kinds of restrictions, maybe with ulterior motives, so that his wealth was always, litigated and so forth and so on. It's just like now when we give, if we make donations, if we give to the university with a stipulation that they have to build a new wing with our name on it, and that they cannot that our donation cannot be used for people of quote inferior races or women or something like this. Those are the kinds of restrictions. You do have that wealth in the future, but then there are all sorts of restrictions on your wealth. There might be law cases against you and so forth. So one can look at it in definitely in that way, and that's a good observation, I think. Thank you for that. Okay, so hopefully we've created some virtue today, although our minds might be uncertain of that because of the material being, sort of a little bit obscure at first. Let's dedicate the virtues that we created. Louise is going to put up the prayers if she hasn't already. So, yeah. You have to continue on after that, Louise. The dedication prayers. There we go. Due to these virtues, Gewadi, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha, Lama Sangye Drupgyurne, and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. Dei Sala. It doesn't say that enlightened state, but that very state. That means, may I become a Guru Buddha. May I lead all sentient beings and set them into that state of a Guru Buddha. As a result of the virtues I've created, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not yet arisen in my mind and in the mind streams of others arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase mo and mo. And then continuing. There we go. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, those are the two ways of upholding the teachings, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings. While striving, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the Bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And as Doris pointed out, maybe some others also pointed out, but this last verse comes from the Songs of Experience of Lama Tsong Khapa. This verse, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request, and please live long and stable lives. Okay. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you on Monday. I'm going in for another urinary tract examination on Tuesday. We'll see what happens, but everything should be there on Monday. So save up your questions, read this section again, read the next section, try to see where we are. We've just refuted production from other, and now we're into this section where there's a doubt. Does the world invalidate that? The world wants to say, oh, you don't need all this philosophy. All you need to do is rely on people. They say things are produced from others. So you philosophers are crazy. So let's see what, read what Chandrakirti said and what Lama Tsong Khapa explained, and we'll go over that on Monday. Look forward to seeing you then. Be good. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable.
See you
Thank
soon.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.